Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Jan Younghusband. I'm Head of Music Television Commissioning at the BBC. And as you know, rock and roll is a very, very important part of our output. And I'm very, very keen to introduce the idea to the IMZ of the high end of the rock doc. So I have sitting next to me today some of the most distinguished and powerful people in my world, in the rock world. And they very sweetly agreed to be here today to talk about what makes a great rock doc. So to introduce them all from the other end, Andrew Winter, who is Eagle Rock, one of our great partners, distributor and producer. And last year we did the Genesis film together, amongst many others. Next to him, Mark Cooper, who is the mastermind behind all those many great docs you see on BBC 4 and 2, what we call the Great Friday Nights on BBC 4 particularly, who's head of music television in London, running our production department in classical and rock and roll. Next to him is the legendary Julien Temple, who I think probably needs no introduction. Great filmmaker and music filmmaker, and the only person I know who has David Bowie's private mobile phone on his speed dial. Next to him is Sasha Ntivyihabwa, who is a producer, German producer and co-producer, who's making programs in Germany and is interested in co-production and working abroad. And then Ben Whalley, who is one of our BBC directors, making many films for us across the BBC. And so I'd like to start. What we're going to do today is first I'm going to ask each member of the panel to introduce a clip and say why they've chosen it. And then Ben is going to chair the discussion part of the session about the various elements of what our panelists think make a nice rock doc. So I hope you'll see lots of lovely clips of some really fantastic films. So I'll start with Julien. And ask you to introduce your first clip, which is The Filth and the Fury.
Well, I chose this because I actually had a video of it, so I could look at it and remind myself what was in it. But I'd like to show the opening of it, partly because I think it just gives a sense of what I feel is very important about music documentaries, is that they are not really about music. They're about the world in which that music was made and the people who made it and the audience who loves it or loved it. It's about places and times, whether it's a film made now or a film about an earlier time. I feel it's really very exciting to use music as a kind of lens through which to look at that whole social context that produces great music. And I think now that we have 100 years or more of film and recorded music, the combination of the two are the closest you can get to time travel and really revisit different places and moments in time. So an element of that I'd like to feel comes through in this clip.
So we could roll the clip.
Well, now, as we come towards the end of this evening on BBC One, Michael Fish takes a late look at the weather.
Again, a good deal of cloud, a little rain from time to time for much of the day, but later on that rain is going to become ever more persistent, and eventually I think that rain will probably turn out to be fairly heavy.
What you've seen in any documentary about any band before or since is how great and wonderful everything is. It's not the truth of it. It's hell, it's hard, it's horrible, it's enjoyable to a small degree. But if you know what you're doing it for, you'll tolerate all that, because the work at the end of the day is what matters. We managed to offend all the people we were fucking fed up with. Labour Party, who'd promised so much after the war, had done so little for the working class that the working class were confused about even themselves and didn't even understand what working class meant anymore.
Well, it's cold and miserable. No one had any jobs. You couldn't get a job. Everyone was on the dole. If you weren't born into money, then you might as well kiss your fucking life goodbye. You weren't going to amount to anything.
The germ, the seed, the Sex Pistols generated from that.
Now is the winter of our discontent made glorious summer by this son of York.
They're great. Thank you. That's a great clip. So now to Mark Cooper. Would you like to introduce Otis Redding?
Okay. So I think this goes even further back in time than 1976. This is a film that we made a few years ago about the great soul singer Otis Redding, who incredibly nobody in 45 years or since his death had made a documentary exploring his life, his music, and his times. And as Julian said, the world that Otis came out of was incredibly. It was a segregated world, and he was one of the key architects of putting soul music and indeed Black Pride on the map in America. But he also came to the UK and sort of transformed for a lot of us who were growing up and put soul music. The Otis Blue album was a crucial album for any teenager in Britain in the 60s, and also changed many artists, many great artists, from Rod Stewart to Tom Jones, etc., who saw Otis in action. So this documentary has a particularly British slant in seeing the impact that Otis had in the UK, but it's also a very personal, emotional film because it features his widow and his daughter, and you really get, I think, in it a sense of Otis the man. And this is, I think, the introduction to the film, Ben, is that right? Yep. That sort of sets up some of the footage of the film and telescopes its story, hopefully. So enjoy.
Human life has been so wonderful. I can't stop now.
Otis Redding was the ultimate soul voice of the American South, but he'd had to fight for recognition.
I feared no man when I traveled with Otis Redding. I feared no man as long as he was by my side, no matter where we were.
When we came to the UK, and Otis felt it because he had been through hell, he was treated like a human being.
Otis discovered a new self-confidence when he toured Europe in 1967. It would change his life and music and inspire those who saw him.
When he came over to England, I just stood in the wings watching him, and just picking up pointers because he had a style.
It was Road to Damascus for me. The whole evening blew me away, and that's really when I decided that this is what I wanted to do,
In the early days, I would always try and sound like Otis, and in doing so, that developed the voice that has become my own. Like all great singers, you always think they're singing for you and just you alone.
Right, so you see their great interviews, great archive. Getting famous and heritage musicians back together to talk about their lives is a very important part of the work we do. And so Andrew is going to introduce Crossfire Hurricane.
Yep. So Crossfire Hurricane was actually a very short production process of just under a year of getting the Stones to all talk about their careers. They never actually appear in the film. And to do basically a breathtaking 40-odd or 50 years probably down into 2 hours, it's quite a feat. So we kind of stopped it at about 82, to be quite honest. So we did all the interesting years, and then also wanted to kind of make the distinction about them being the kind of slightly earlier generational rebels, earlier to Sex Pistols, but they were that. So yeah, hope you enjoy it. Thanks.
Well, you've now been on your second tour of the United States for 2 weeks. How was it?
Things started happening for us.
Well, why did they start happening?
Something sort of chemicals, reaction seemed to have happened somewhere.
What would you say happened?
Really don't know.
The Rolling Stones aren't everyone's cup of tea. Almost as many enemies as fans.
And the Beatles got the white hat. What's left? The black hat.
So if you've got heroes, you've got an anti-hero. It's good to have an actor who can play the part.
It's almost a fairy story, you know?
So it's interesting to see the range of the work. And what do you do when your key characters don't want to be on camera? And that was a great triumph, that film. So, Ben.
Well, I'm always a self-publicist, so I'd like to show the most recent thing I've made, which is a BBC Two series, and it's a bit different to everything else you've seen. This is a clip of a comedian called Reginald D. Hunter. He lives in the UK. He's an American comedian who was born in Georgia, and I took him on a road trip through the Deep South for 5 weeks last summer, and it's going to make a 3-part series called Reginald D. Hunter's Songs of the South. And the particular clip I'd like to show you is one in which Reg is addressing an early form of pop music known as minstrelsy. I'm sure many of you know what it is, but just to be very clear, minstrelsy was a 19th century American tradition, and it involved essentially white people writing in first person about the American black slavery experience. So these are very difficult songs, and what the song you hear underneath is, what is it? Old Folks at Home, which is a very well-known melody and is performed by the Hanson family. And this is just Reg's musings on the idea. It's a plantation nostalgia song. The idea that in these minstrel songs, all written by normally white Northerners in America, that slaves, freed slaves or slaves, old slaves, somehow pined for their former lives of servitude. And this is Reg musing on this idea out in the Deep South.
All around the little farm I wandered when I was young.
Picking endless bales of cotton in this heat for massa must have been a special kind of hell. And the idea that some former slave pined for this life seemed like some kind of sick joke, but it ain't inconceivable.
When I was
In 1863, Abraham Lincoln signed the Emancipation Proclamation and set the slaves free. Free to what? Free to have no homes, no health care, and no education. And under such conditions, it is easy to imagine that more than a few slaves would have pined for the security of the old plantation.
all the world is sad and dreary everywhere I roam. Oh, darkies, how my heart grows weary, far
So this series, which starts next week on BBC Two, is a new departure for us, having a presenter telling us the story, a single presenter in rock music, which we don't often do. So we're interested to see how this will go down with our audience. But he's an amazing storyteller, and it's a journey of him going home and going back to the music where he grew up. Sasha, would you like to introduce your clip?
Yes, I chose a clip from a production which was called Birth of Groove, which we did, I think, in 2009. And I think it brings together some points that already have been mentioned here. On the one side, legendary artists that talk about their experience. Rare footage that we found that describes the context of the music, like Julian just said. It's not only about the music. I think a documentary should also put music in a time frame, in a place, and also an historical frame. And maybe the third reason why I chose it is also one aspect that I want to stress, which is opportunity, because I think also for us opportunity is an important point, because like this clip will feature Gregory Porter, a guy who recently won a Grammy, who has a huge success in Germany and also I think in UK and the US the last 2 or 3 years. And we met him in a very small bar in Harlem, and he was singing about the 1960s, exactly the period that we wanted to discuss in the film. And he was talking about the riots that happened in Detroit in 1967, which were very relevant for soul music, the whole Motown movement. And we invited him over to sing us a song, and it's a clip that brings together Gregory Porter as an unknown artist singing the song 1960 Watt from his first album, and also Martha Reeves, who is a Motown legend.
Alexander, can we just go to clip 10, please?
Okay, sorry for that one. Okay, this is the right clip. It's Greg's voice.
What? 1960 who? 1960 what? 1960 who? 19. Hey, the Motor City is burning. That ain't right.
I visited Detroit, and there's still burned out houses, burned out buildings from riots in Detroit. It's not just about Detroit, it's about the pressure cooker of racial tension exploding, and that's what the song is about.
A voice of a people.
It's your country. If you'll stay in it and work with it.
Standing on the balcony of Lorraine.
I left Detroit burning. My dad was patrolling the neighborhood. He had a scattergun shotgun. He said he was not going to let them burn the neighborhood store. Where would he get milk for his children?
He was a gun. He was the only one to fall down, y'all. That ain't right. Then his people scream.
The plane did take off, but when we landed in Myrtle Beach, South Carolina, and there was a fear of a riot happening, so we were asked not to perform, and we got on a plane and we flew from there to Los Angeles. And all of a sudden, the riot breaks out there. So it seemed like everywhere we went that year, there was a riot. But that riot was going to happen. You oppress a people long enough, something like a rubber band has got to snap.
So as you can see from all those clips, there are many, many different elements. So I'm going to hand over now to Ben, who's going to discuss with the panel their insights into, what the key elements are of these films and what you need to do to make them work.
For the rest of the discussion, everybody has chosen a clip potentially of their own production or of something that they have thought is a wonderful film. And we're going to start by introducing these clips and then just opening the discussion out to what makes a good clip. I'm going to be brief here because we need to keep this moving along, but I'd like to start with Julian, who's chosen a clip from Don't Look Back, the great Dylan film directed by D.A. Pennebaker. And I wondered if Julian would like to explain why he chose this before we show the clip.
Well, I think this is one of the first great music documentary portraits of someone in the kind of modern era of filmmaking. It really captures that freedom that came about in the early 60s with the new small 16mm cameras and the ability to shoot in sync sound with a very relatively minimal crew. So you could have a kind of fly-on-the-wall, a kind of visceral intimacy with the artist or performer that you were filming. And I think that's interesting because the context of today with the real extraordinary advances every month, it seems, in the technology that you can shoot with now. I think that the possibilities of filming have opened up even more in that way. And I think one of the crucial things about working with people like those we've seen on the screen is achieving a kind of intimacy with them, a kind of honesty in your relationship with them that can be quite difficult when you're working with someone like the Stones, who you grew up with, and you're a huge fan of, and you meet them, and when I met the Stones, it was typically in the Ritz in Paris, and big meal, meeting all of them, and I was completely kind of overawed by it, really. But I was particularly concerned that Keith Richards was sitting opposite, scowling at me through the dinner, not saying anything. And this was for a video that we were supposed to do, and I was like, shit, he doesn't like me. And at the end of the dinner, he said, "Oi, you, come with me down to the bogs," as he called them, in the basement of the Ritz. We get in the toilet, and he had a walking stick with him that he snapped open. It was actually a sword stick. And he had my throat up against the wall saying, "I'm not in this video enough," So I thought, well, you've got to kind of work with this guy. But I think, the portrait that you can make of these people has to be based on a two-way kind of honesty. You've got to get over that fandom, that sense that these guys are somehow higher mortals, or, the way that these people have been sold to you over the years as stars, and treat them as human beings and make as honest a film. Obviously you respect these people or you wouldn't be there making a film, but you also want to tell some kind of personal truth about them. And this film really captures the sense of a crew going in there and becoming almost part of Dylan's band and making a beautifully honest and poetic film.
So if we could have the clip, Alexander, please. Number 6.
When you feel you just can't make it anymore, with your head bowed down and you're staring at the floor, search out to me with your weary eyes, I'll sing a song for you. That's what I'm here to do, to sing for you. Now every man, he has his work, and to find out mine, you ain't got far to go. Just call out to me with your weary eyes, I'll sing a song for you. That's what I'm here to do, to sing for you, to sing for you.
John,
I want to hear about this 11 now, baby blue. Want to hear that? Yeah. Did you have a plastic? I've done that thing. Play boy. What key did you turn it down to? A D tune. orphan with his gun, crying like a fire in the sun. Look out, the saints are coming through, and it's all over now, baby blue. The highway is for gamblers, better use your sense. Take what you have gathered from coincidence. The vagabond who's rapping at your door is standing in the clothes that you once wore. Strike another match, go start anew, and it's all over now, baby blue. Great though. That's nice, Bob. But you want to hear that song?
So I'd just like to open this out to the panel quickly, and I'm going to be quick because I'd love to hear everybody's points. I'd just like to say one thing, which is this is a documentary in the purest sense. It's a document of the time. So many of the clips we've seen today are about historicizing music, about kind of the iconic, if you like, moments and people in music. This is a prime source that captures this icon, Dylan, in this kind of, on this British tour, and I just love it so much. I think it's an amazing, amazing film. And the second thing I'd like to say about the clip, I did hear Julian say it was a bit cruel, the choice of clip. And it is a clip in which Donovan, the British artist who plays at the beginning, is slightly humbled by Dylan in a sort of pass the guitar around kind of session. And I think that kind of access for a camera and that sort of intimacy in this day and age is very hard to achieve, and is very. I don't know if it's about the kind of the fact that cameras are with us everywhere, that media is with us everywhere, that everybody is media savvy, but there is an honesty and purity to this film which I love. So I wondered if anybody in the panel just wanted to chip in and say you're talking rubbish, or you agree, or about that film.
Well, I think a lot of the documentaries that we've watched and been introduced, we're in a period of historicizing music, whether it's rock music, soul music, and hip-hop. And there's an advantage to that of looking back and getting artists maybe who aren't in the white heat of the original creativity that made them famous, but getting them to reflect on what that moment meant. Because it's true that quite often when you make films with people whose career is unfolding in front of them, quite often it can be, particularly when driven by the record industry, it can be mere hype. It can be promotional. And I suppose what's extraordinary about this film, and what we all love about it, is the sense of access to something that feels very real, unfolding before your eyes, in which people aren't selling something or promoting something, quite the opposite. And I think that's the struggle for any filmmaker now, is how to both tell the truth about the past, but also find ways about registering the present. And that, it's true, it's hard to do, which is why I think probably we all, as you judge from the clip, spend a lot of time meditating on the 60s, 70s, and 80s. And probably it's a task for all of us to find ways of making more films that are situated in the present. But equally, I think it's obvious for the audience and for the artists that these artists are reflecting on a golden era of creativity, tension, and social transformation. And that's special also to get the privilege to meditate on what that meant with some wisdom of hindsight as well as immediacy. And I think that's what's good about the historical moment, provided it doesn't become merely sentimental, nostalgic, or self-indulgent.
Anyone else want to come in on this?
I think it's also, one point worth making is it's the opposite of a kind of hagiography of Dylan, who is obviously at that moment the crucial musical star of his moment. But Pennebaker does, as Ben was saying, show the cruelty of Dylan to not just Dylan, to random journalists, to Joan Baez. You know, you're in awe of this guy, but you're also saying, well, he can be an arsehole, can't he? You know, which to me is the truth of all of these people. And, you know, I think there was historically a danger with the genre that used to be called rockumentary, which was basically blowing sunshine up people's arses, really, a lot of the time. And I think, you know, we've learned to get beyond that. And the technology that we have now does allow you, you know, incredible access to people if you've established this kind of basic trust that you're making a film, warts and all, but about something that fascinates you and is worthy of making a film. And if you can both be involved in creating a kind of honest portrait, the technology now is fantastic for doing that, you know.
Thank you very much, panel. Just before I move on to the next clip, Alexander, just in terms of making this more of a debate, I'm going to give you a cue to stop the next clip to keep it a bit shorter so we can hear more from everyone who's travelled so far to be here. So the next clip is from a documentary called Neil Young, Don't Be Denied, and Mark will tell us why he chose it. Mark Cooper's choice this.
Well, Ben and I actually made this film together, and we got the chance to go to New York to interview Neil, who had a new album coming out. And I kept saying, I don't want to talk about Neil's new album. I want to talk about Neil's life and music and what drives him. And we flew to New York without any very clear assurance that he was going to do this, and that far more likely he was going to tell us how great this new album that this is about 6 years ago was. And we arrived and went to a very expensive hotel somewhere on the Upper East Side where Neil was ensconced with his wife and a Labradoodle, his dog. And just before the interview was due to start, and I did the interview and Ben shot it, his manager, what's his manager's name? You remember? Yeah, Elliot Roberts, his manager, came out and whispered in his ear and said, in my ear, and said, Mark, don't ask him anything about the past. Only talk to him about the new album. So the opposite of what we had gone there to do. And I think the first thing I asked Neil was the first time he'd played New York. And it turned out that this had been with a band called Buffalo Springfield opening for the Doors. And it sort of was a signal from Neil that he was prepared that day, for reasons I and Ben still don't understand, was prepared to meditate on his whole life and his career and his aesthetic. And I suppose that underlines what Julian was saying about access. So this was a magical opportunity to talk to Neil about what really matters to him, but quite why it had appeared at this moment in time and why he chose to share with us. But it made for me for a special film to actually really get him to talk about something a little broader than his latest record. And I think this clip is him talking about what, Ben? I think you helped choose this.
This is Neil talking about, I think it's his 1974 album, On the Beach.
Doing that, we went out and bought all the furniture and went to a junkyard and bought the fin from the car and got the clothes at the Pier 1 and went down to the beach, put on the clothes, set up the furniture.
All my pictures are for...
That was the tail fins of a 59 Cadillac we got in the junkyard, a nice yellow one. You know, just got the newspaper, it just happened to be the right one, you know. Something about Nixon resigning.
World is turning. I hope it don't turn away.
It's a sign of the times.
I need a crowd of people.
Okay, thanks, Alexander.
But I can't.
I'd like to jump in on this because I directed this and made this with Mark, and it was really formed around a superlative interview with Neil. And I want to talk about means and practicality in terms of making films, television. We didn't really get much cooperation from Neil, if the truth be told. Mark told you about how difficult it was. He called me on my birthday. I was in Oxford with my parents and said, just get on a plane. We'll get an interview with him. So we did. And then I spent the next year trying to get more access, trying to get stuff, archival footage out of Neil with varying degrees of success. So in a year, I wanted to do stuff with him around his ranch. I got one interview with him and sort of key interviews with Crosby, Stills and Nash and other collaborators. So not a lot really to make an hour with. But sometimes your limitations allow you to be creative. And one thing I remember watching that is there's a lot of Super 8 footage in it. And I just thought how well there's something about the kind of grit in Neil's music goes with the grit and grain of all that. That was my little Super 8 camera on a beach in Northern California. And just the kind of practical means, the sort of what you have available can often define what you make and can often be quite a creative and liberating experience. And I'd just like to throw that open to anybody to jump in on.
I think that's very true. I did a film, similar thing, about a band called Dr. Feelgood, who'd kind of been written out of history in a way. They were kind of very important for a moment in the early 74, 75, just before punk, the avalanche of punk kind of swept them away, although they'd been partly responsible for instigating the climate musically that allowed that to happen. But as a result, there was very little footage. There was just one live performance of them in any extended concert situation and some BBC TV. So it was a question of how you make a film with just this material, really. And I think when your backs are up against the wall like that, you do have some mad ideas, which are probably the most exciting if you can pull them off. So I was trying to make their story happen through forgotten B-movies of the 50s, British B-movies of gangsters and things that also had been forgotten. So I liked that kind of synchronicity of these two things that had been kind of written out of history. But to try and tell the feel-good story through these scenes from these strange films. And I was inspired in that by having seen the Feelgoods at the time and really thought they were there more to kind of rob the pub that they were playing in than actually deliver a performance. They looked like Reservoir Dogs and performed like Reservoir Dogs. So these movies did somehow manage to tell their story in a way. But it was a long shot and it was a bit of a high-wire act. But sometimes when you're really forced into a corner like that, you can find interesting things to do,
And one thing that I think was really special about that film, Julian, is you had a great interview with Wilko Johnson, the guitarist in the band, but I think it was quite a long way into your film till you actually found the interview with Lee Brillo, the front man, which was kind of crucial because the film was partly about a love story between Wilko, the guitarist, and Lee, Lee, the lead singer. Because often band stories, there are stories, they're the story of families, aren't they? It's brothers and sisters, and that's what gives...
Normally dysfunctional, which is
normally
pretty good.
Like most families, and that gives, I think, music documentaries a real emotional heft that's important. That they are about musicians, but I think good music films are about us too, and certainly the Dr. Feelgood film was, and that was partly because through discovering that piece of very crucial archive, wasn't it, with Lee, that really helped the film.
A kind of a missing interview with him that was found in a barn somewhere in Essex, which. Really made the film possible because without Lee, there's no story really, I think luck in terms of that kind of historical documentary. There is this great kind of detective archive dimension where the researcher who works with you is a hugely important figure, creative figure in the making of these films, and is really a vital part of the team. And the buzz of finding some, unexposed Super 8, that they've found and they've brought to you, and you get it developed, and you see it's Joe Strummer loading the 101er's gear into the back of a van outside his squat in 75. That kind of moment is wonderful and inspires you to really treat this material as something very special, plucked from, oblivion, and you're very honored to kind of be able to work with it. So there are a lot of dimensions, excitements to films like this. It's not just a sense of capturing live performance, which is a fantastic element of a lot of these films, but it is the history and the social context and the artifacts from these times that shed light on why we still are interested in the music, why people at the time made the music popular, as well as the people who wrote the music in response to their place and time. So.
Thank you, Julian. Sorry to cut you short, but I'm going to keep moving this on. The next clip, which is going to be introduced by Andrew Winter, is a clip of a wonderful singer-songwriter film called Robin Hitchcock, Sex, Food, Death and Insects. Andrew, if you'd like to see.
Yeah, not a film that I worked on, by the way, but a great example about what happened was when you just let the camera roll, and basically they found their perfect ending, which I think you remember, Mark, because you played that programme out on BBC. So, yeah, a bit of luck and circumstance, really, and it's a great ending to actually a really good film that I would love to have worked on, but didn't. Do you want to play the clip? 'Cause
Number 8, please, Alexander.
Playing music justifies existence. I often feel, really shitty and poisonous, and I think I've just got life wrong, and then I'm there with a guitar, or there with my friend, my musician colleagues, we're picking away, and whoosh, all that horrible, toxic idiocy that seems to fuel human life is all transferred into fuel.
We evolve.
Hello? Who's calling? Tracy, this is Robin. Roger, okay. Where do you think Roger is? Roger has a beard and glasses. Where did you last see him? Oh, I see. Hang on, I can't see anyone with a beard and glasses. Tanned older model truck. Jeez. Anyone seen Roger? No, I would call back in like sort of 5 minutes or something. I can't see him. I'm afraid I'm just passing by, so I can't immediately help you. Okay, you're very welcome, Tracy. Bye. Oh, looking for Roger.
Part of making any film, documentary film, television, is the financial process, is having a market, is landing it, is selling the film. And I wondered if I might ask Andrew to outline more of his role in that world and the challenges and just what it's like.
Well, very briefly, quite a few challenges, but mainly, the projects that I get involved in have always got international appeal. That's mainly what I'm looking at, and it really is finance. I finance them really out of pre-sales or co-productions or commissions. Some of the people you see on this stage, but also mainly out of America. So, be it Crossfire Hurricane or Pink Floyd. Of Queen and Freddie Mercury or two others as well. They've all got to have the appeal into America. And one of the challenges that I'm finding now is I'm just working on a new film with Paul Weller and the Jam for October this year is finding a production partner in America. There's a tough one. But I have found one, which is great. Anglophiles, by the way. And now we're moving ahead. We're in production, but it's putting together all of those, all the finance side of things, and making that run alongside the budget, making sure, of course, I do not go over budget as well, is quite a challenge. But mainly, if you've got the right artists and you've got the right production staff and a key director as well, then life becomes a bit easier, really, I suppose.
Do you have a European market?
Yeah.
Do you have any co-partners in Europe?
Yeah, in terms of partners in Europe, we tend to work a lot with Arte and ZDF, and mainly them. That's for France and Germany. A bit of Sky and Rai in Italy, as well. So yeah, it kind of makes it through that way. A Canadian co-producer, which is Super Channel, which basically takes all the Showtime stuff. So they're a perfect partner. In Australia sometimes as well with SBS, you're in the room, and ABC as well. So yeah, becomes a bit of a soup really in the end.
Thank you, Andrew. I'm just going to keep this moving on. The next clip is one of my clips. I thought as we're coming to Germany, I once made a film about what the British press termed krautrock in the 70s, which is loosely, you could be described as German experimental music that kind of blossomed in the newly rebuilt Germany, post-war Germany. And this is a clip of a band called Neu. I just thought it was appropriate as we're in Berlin. So clip 9, please.
When Klaus and I started recording the first Neu album, we just had this basic vision. I always lived near water. I lived near water in Hamburg, where I was born, in Munich, right next to the river, Isar, in Wilmslow, on the Bollin, River Bollin, and in Pakistan at the seaside, and Düsseldorf at the Rhine. And I feel very comfortable in water, with water, and it has an effect. I can't really explain it. It's like time. It's something that has to do with time, the passage of time. And in a way, it's also a picture like of music, moving along. Like the music, there's some parallels.
Boy, to put Neu into words, the drummer was playing in a way that when you listen to it, allowed your thoughts to flow, allowed emotions to come from within and occupy the active parts of your mind, I thought. It allowed beauty. To get there, the guy has somehow found a way to free himself from the tyranny of stupid blues, rock, of all conventions that I'd ever heard. Some sort of a pastoral psychedelicism.
So I'd like to ask our one member of the panel, who I believe works in Germany, Sasha, just to, maybe if you want to talk to that, or just talk to the idea of making films about German music, maybe.
This is a very funny coincidence, I would say, because I was raised in Düsseldorf, and the guy Klaus Dinger, the two brothers of Neu, they lived right around the corner where I grew up, and I took my dog for a walk every day, passing these guys, and I think they're like 8 or 10 years older than me, so I've been watching those guys very carefully, and maybe even sitting here today has to do with the fact that I was growing up very close to these boys. And secondly, I would have to comment that just, I think, 8 weeks ago, a book was released. It's called Electricity. It's about electronic pop culture from Düsseldorf. And I think Neu are very relevant for this case. And I don't know if it has been translated yet in English, but I'm sure that this book would be very, very interesting for you British people. Because also Iggy Pop is cited. I think he's even interviewed in the book. Also the Dinger brothers, very, very interesting case. And for us, as you maybe to respond to your question, very funny for Germans to watch how British people introduce and have a look on German pop music, because usually it's otherwise around.
Well, in terms of this film, the other bands in there were Can, Faust, Kraftwerk, Harmonia and Cluster, all experimental, loosely electronic-based acts that I love. And I just want to say something that is kind of... It's a very interesting cultural exchange, because I think most of those bands ignored what was going on in England and America at the time, ignored the Rolling Stones, ignored the kind of three-chord trick of American R&B. And I think it was also a part of this sort of process of rebuilding Germany, the Germany of their parents' generation as baby boomers, that they sought to kind of connect with a new Europeanism and a kind of forgetting of old ways and building from... new again. I just want to say it was a real privilege to do this in 2009 and spend 2.5 weeks just traveling around wonderful Germany making a film about incredibly creative musicians. So I'm going to really...
Can I ask a question about that? I mean, is there a tradition in Germany of making films? So Ben came over here and made this film. Is there a market? Are there TV stations that you can make films about Neu or Kraftwerk or German popular music?
Like Kraftwerk, I think Cobalt TV, a company, I think I have seen them today. They just last year they made a film with Kraftwerk, and especially Kraftwerk, not easy access, like we've been talking about access to artists, and Ralf Schneider, very difficult guy. But they made it, and I think it was a very good film. So there is a market, there is an interest, and I would say as soon as Germans start to recognize that British people are interested in their own stuff, I hope the awareness will rise.
Thank you, Sasha. And we come to the last clip, which is one of yours. It's from a production called Queens of Pop. Sorry, it's not. Yes, it is. It's from Queens of Pop, Lady Gaga. Alexandra, it's number 5, but before you play it, would you like to introduce it, Sasha?
Yes. First of all, I didn't know that we were even allowed to pick films that haven't been made by ourselves. Maybe otherwise I would have chosen a different clip. But it makes sense because it's not a clip that is historizing, because we've been seeing, and as you told, I think the greatest part of rockumentaries, music documentaries or music films are historizing music, putting music in a context. And again, this clip, we had a great opportunity to have access to Lady Gaga. I think the film was made in 2011, and the interview that you see is made, I think, 2009, Lady Gaga's first visit to Germany. And one of our editors, Jürgen Schindler, who is a very good nose, he said, this lady is interesting, and we had the access to, here in Berlin, to drive around with Lady Gaga in a limousine for half a day. And I think both of them had a very good chemistry, and she was talking and talking and talking. And 2 years later, we came up with a documentary series, Queens of Pop, Lady Gaga. So we combined it, and we had almost a year time to dwell for very rare footage of Lady Gaga before her coming out as a Kunstperson, as an artist, a designed artist, I would say. And maybe what also is interesting, if you watch this, also it has been discussed, maybe if you compare Bob Dylan, is really somebody sneaking in and being part. And this interview with Lady Gaga, I think she's opening up herself, but it's it's a play in a way. She's playing her role. So yeah, have a look.
I dream endlessly about tomorrow, and I cry about all of the things that I would love to change about today. But I'm quite alone, a lot. So my vanity, which is my obsession with my work, and if work is synonymous with myself, then truly, if you live your life in art, it is a life of self-obsession.
So we've got 5 minutes left, so are there any questions from the floor? I actually can't really see anyone, but anyone got any questions? No? You have, right. Do you need a microphone? Would you like to say who you are?
Hello, okay, this is, I'm Kotaro Urakami from NHK Japan, and nice to hear your great works and things. We are struggling really hard with the making the rock or pop documentary in Japan as well, trying to persuade artists, wanting to talk about the newest albums, newest work. I wanted to ask you about how you persuaded Neil Young's manager when he whispered to your ear, ask about the...
I ignored him because I knew Elliot a bit, and I thought maybe he was putting me on. And I figured if I just start the interview, I would see what would happen. And I'd been saying all the time, I want to do a big interview, a proper interview that can go anywhere. And I'd conveyed this many times. So part of me just thought he was putting me on, really. And so on that occasion, I ignored him. But I think it's always a battle, of getting access, of getting people to trust you. We've all said the same thing about trust, You're asking somebody, who has a whole career on their shoulders to open up to you and be intimate and share something, not only with you, but an audience, which is about really where they live, what drives them. And that takes trust. And they have to like something about you. They have to maybe put their knife to your throat a couple of times, but not kill you. And I think equally, if you can get to people and they can tell you're sincere and care about their music, there is an urge in people to tell their story, to share their story. So whether you're Lady Gaga or Neil Young or maybe not Bob Dylan, but virtually everybody else, people do want to share. I think, give them half a chance, don't you, Julian, if they trust you?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. I think you're right. Ignore the manager, because, if Neil's happy to talk, the manager isn't going to stop him, so... but I think it is interesting, Scorsese is a great filmmaker, as we know, but that Dylan film was slightly odd that the manager interviewed Dylan, which is a recipe for not really getting behind the mask, the enigma, which I'm sure was what Bob wanted to preserve. But, I think generally we'd like our films to reveal, who this person is and what his life has been about, rather than hide behind the manager or have the manager do the interview,
There was another question, I think, over here in the back. Was there another one? Oh, just there, yeah.
Hi, I'm Chris Hunt. I wanted to agree about trust. It seems to me that the only way you get to get beyond the veil with a lot of the main artists is if they respect you and you respect them, and it has to be both ways, I think, in order to get anywhere. The documentaries I made, I found I started working on, this is my question, films about people I really liked, and then discovered I made better films about people I really disliked, because I wasn't a fan and I wasn't trying to sell these people, and I wasn't trying to say how great they were. I was trying to find out what they were up to and everything else, and I just wondered if you guys have the same impression.
Well, I think equally making it too much about a person. One of the first films I was involved with making is a film about Shane MacGowan, who I think is one of the greatest lyricists and songwriters, certainly was when we made the film in the in the early 90s. And but personally, he was a complete mess, and drinking too much and everything else. And there was a great scene in this film in which he went into. He was really needing a drink, and he went into a pub and went in the back door, and he couldn't find the bar. And he's going, "Where's the pub? Where's the pub?" like this, because he's just desperate for a drink. But I suppose equally the filmmaker, Mike Connolly, who made that film, he did like Shane and he had to keep him on board, but he also had to put up with his alcohol intake, the 3 or 4 people who are around him, and just stick to trying getting some sense of the truth out of Shane. And I suppose the other thing we did, and I think that's the beauty of getting a good cast for a film, is we got 4 or 5 other artists to sing Shane's songs and talk about him, so that we could tease out the strengths of Shane's songwriting without Shane having to be a participant. I think really when you make a film about someone, and Ben and Julian are better than this because I tend not to go out on the road, you probably have to put liking them behind you. And you just have to be truthful.
Well, quite often you think you like them and realise you don't like them sometimes. Well, no,
yeah, that's what I found a lot.
Can I ask?
I think it's great making films about people who've been forgotten for that reason, because they're not, they're not riding a huge wave of fame and success anymore, and perhaps they deserve to be better known, and that's quite a satisfying thing to find people, who've been just wiped out of history and bring them back.
Well, I think something like 20 Feet from Stardom is an extraordinary film about the kind of unsung heroes behind the heroes.
Yeah, definitely.
That was a very, very powerful film about musicianship and the many people involved in creating the performance. I had one last question I wanted to ask. I had a question. As a commissioner, do you think that we've got too formulaic? Because when I look at your work, Julian, with the Sex Pistols, where you just used to follow them around a lot, do you think that as broadcasters and commissioners we're too formulaic? You want it to be an hour long and it's got to have a lens into the story, and it's got to be when Mick Jagger's releasing his next album or whatever. I just wondered if we need to be freer and let filmmakers just follow artists more, so those sort of chance things can happen.
Totally, I think that's a fantastic statement.
Let's do it.
Follow that. I know that it's very hard to, we work within the context of scheduling and the way things are, but I think, more and more people access their entertainment on YouTube and places like that, where there's obviously a greater flexibility. Length can be what's determined. It can be very short or it can be longer. And I think, we've been talking about this idea of perhaps having someone like Keith Richards take over a BBC channel, and I think one of the interesting things would be how you schedule that. You can have little morsels of things, and then you can have longer things, and it can be a little more unpredictable. When I was a kid, we used to go to the Cinémathèque in Paris at the weekend, and you just lie. You had a sleeping bag. You just lie in the cinema, which had no seats, and you didn't know what was going to come on next. But it was 24-hour rolling projection, and you'd sleep through half of them and then you'd be ecstatic. But it was wonderful, this unpredictability. And I think a little more of that, which people seem to love online, following these weird trails through endless nights on YouTube and things, I applaud your opening statement there.
Yes, all broadcasters, please note. Anyway, I'd like to thank our panel, Andrew, Mark, Julian, Sasha and Ben. All very busy people who've come specially for this panel. They're around for the rest of the day, so I'm sure if you have other burning questions, you'll be able to talk to them. And Andrew and I are doing an expert panel, I think, at 4:00, and maybe that some of my other panelists might join us on that. So thank you very much. It was really, really interesting, and thank you for being such a good audience.